Hey there, it's me again, Keisha, and this is the next video in our tutorial series on getting started with Fingerprint, specifically around account security. If you've been following along, you know that last time we added some bot detection as well as a way to detect suspicious activity from your visitors. Now I want to focus on that visitor ID that we started with in the beginning. This visitor ID is unique to a particular browser or device and is stable over months, sometimes even years. Even if cookies are cleared, you go into incognito or VPN is used. So it makes a great tool to actually identify past returning devices. So what we're going to do is to check to see if the device that we're using or that visitor ID has been seen before in the past. If yes, great, smooth sailing, continue on with the login process. And if not, then again, we might want to bump up the authentication like we did with the suspect score and request a one-time passcode. So the first thing I'm going to do is make a new function here at the bottom to check my database for any known devices. You can see I'm taking the username and visitor ID as parameters here. And I'm going to do a quick select statement to grab any matching devices for this particular user. Then I'll pass in my parameter values. And then from here, basically, if we do find a match, we know that this device has been used to log in to this particular account before, then we can say, yep, known device. Otherwise, I'll pass back false for an unknown device. So if there's no device found, return false. Otherwise, just return true. Okay. Let's go ahead and grab this and use it in our main login check function. And we already have the username from what was passed into the login check, and we have the visitor ID from the identification event, so we can send that over to the database. Then if we find that it is not a known device, we can flip on that MFA required variable. Now, the only way for a known device check to work is if we have a way of storing those known devices. We recommend doing this after you've done some kind of verification. So I'm going to add in a new function here. I'll call it just add known device. And then later I'll use it on my server file for that OTP endpoint that we saw earlier. First things first, let's go ahead and actually make that function that we can pass back. Similar signature here with the username and visitor ID. And I'm just going to insert into that user devices table the username and visitor ID. Okay. And let's go ahead and pass in the username and username and visitor ID as my particular parameters here for this parameterized SQL statement. Make sure I got everything good. Yep, values, great. We got the values. Great. Okay. So what I can do now is actually pass this add known device function back to the server. Let me just grab this here and save that. And I'm going to look in our OTP endpoint here that's actually doing the validation. And I'm going to add in that function right here. So we're going to pass in the username and the visitor ID. Now, at this point, we only are working with our session information. So I'm going to grab this from the session. So username will be from the request. Session, username, which we do set in our login process. And then same thing for the visitor ID, we'll do request. And the session visitor ID. Now, I do want to make sure I'm actually passing that back here as well so that the visitor ID is actually being saved. Going back into our login check, let's just include the visitor ID. And I think I already have the visitor ID being added here in our session. Yes. So we are setting that session variable here with the visitor ID being passed from the login check result. Okay, all that being said, we now are going to actually update our database with the username and visitor ID when we successfully authenticate with an OTP. And then later on, I can check that in my login check using the check known device function. That'll query that same table. If it is found, great, smooth sailing, no need for an additional OTP check. If not, it will prompt. Okay, let's see it in action. I'm going to log out. Okay, now they're all set. I'm going to go ahead and pop in my credentials. Ooh, actually, want to make sure that I am including this function here when I require a login check. Okay, now let's go ahead and try this in action. So I'll add my credentials, click sign in. And because we've never seen this particular account before with this particular device before, we are triggering that MFA required, and we can put in the one-time passcode. I'll hit submit, and I successfully log in. And remember, on that OTP endpoint, it's going to save my device ID or that visitor ID into a list along with the username. Now, if I log out and I go back and log in again, because it recognized my device and the visitor ID, I didn't get that extra friction of having to submit an OTP again. So you can use that visitor ID as a reliable way to detect and recognize devices. And this would work even if I open this in incognito mode, it would still recognize that same device. Now, at this point, I'm going to stop the video, but in our next session, we're going to look at the opposite of this, where instead of logging in, we'll take a look at how we can stop new account fraud. Take care.